So this is the second part of Unit 7 Objective 1 lesson where we're just trying to get an introduction to what's called completing the square. So we'll go into more detail when we do Objective 2 lesson, but we're just trying to get like a sense of what that even means. So when we talk about we want to create a perfect square trinomial, so we have to remember like what does that mean again? So before we start doing any problems, we're just trying to remember a perfect square trinomial. So if I have something along the lines of x squared minus, 6x plus 9, I know that when I factor this, I would get x minus 3 times itself. And so that would be x minus 3 squared. So this is called a perfect square trinomial because negative 3 creates my middle term, and it also creates my ending term. So it's a perfect square, meaning negative 3 times negative 3 is a square, right? Number, so negative 3 squared gives me my 9, and so if I have the same thing twice, I create a quantity squared. So that was a whole perfect square trinomial. So when we're looking at this worksheet here, so this was our worksheet, I'm trying to figure out, well, what number would have to go here so that when I do factor it, I would get a quantity squared. I would get the same thing twice, right? That's what my goal is. So I have to think about, well, how did I create this negative 4x? Like, what two things did I add together so that I would get negative 4? And that could be a lot of things. We could add together negative 3 and negative 1. We could add together negative 5 and positive 1. Lots of different things that would add up to negative 4. But if I want a perfect square, it has to be the same exact thing. So I know that if I were to add together negative 2, then I would get my negative 4x. And I know then, by the way factoring works and distributive property, that I would also multiply these two terms to find my constant. And so if I were to multiply negative 2 by itself, so negative 2 by itself, then that would give me positive 4. And so that would be the term that needs to add in order to have a perfect square trinomial. And so if I were to factor it, it would be x minus 2 quantity squared. Okay, so that's what we're just trying to do, right? We're trying to figure out what two numbers added together to get the middle term. Those same two numbers times itself will give me my constant. So for example, if I wanted to add 12 together, I would use 6 plus 6. And so then this term would be 6 times 6. If I wanted to add up for 2, I would use positive 1 and positive 1 to add to 2. So positive 1 times positive 1 would give me my constant. So it gets a little trickier if they're not even numbers or if they weren't integer values. So if we have rational numbers, it gets a little bit trickier. So I'm going to do question number 6 here just to kind of get the idea here. So I know that in order to find negative 4, I'm really just taking half of that number, right? So negative 2 and then adding it to itself, and that's how I get negative 4, by just splitting it in half. So if I want to do the same thing here, I want to take half of 2/3. So it's a little bit harder when it's fractions, but not if we write it, what we're thinking and what we're saying. So we're thinking, okay, I need to split this up evenly, meaning I need to take half of it. So if I were to take half of that number, this would cancel, right? So then I would have just 1/3. So I know if I add 1/3 to itself, that gives me my 2/3. So in order to find my constant, it's from multiplying these, right? So for my constant, I would just do 1/3 times itself, or 1/3 squared, which is 1 times 1, and then 3 times 3. Okay. All right, so now what we have to do in the long run in terms of the rest of the unit is we're going to actually have equations that we have to work with. So we have to do the same concept, we just have to do this just a little bit different. So I'm going to take a look at the middle one here, x squared plus 10x equals 0. So I want it to look like what I have here. I want to say, okay, what do I need to add to 10x, right, in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial? And what I have on this side is a 0 as well. And I know to keep equations balanced, if I add something here, I also have to add it here. So my goal is not, what do I need to add over here? My goal is to make this a perfect square trinomial. So I know that if I add 5 and 5 together, I will get 10. And to get my constant, I need to take 5 and multiply it by itself. So 5 times 5 is 25. Well, I can't just add a 25 here if I don't also add it to the other side. So what did I do? I took half of 10, which is 5, because those add up to 10, and then times it by itself to get 25. So then I have to put it in this form here, so they want me to actually factor it. So I'm going to add these two together first. And then when I factor this, it would be x plus 5 and x plus 5, or x plus 5 squared.